Deep in the void between the stars, the human stealth vessel Shadow Seeker drifted silently, its quantum-dampened hull absorbing all traces of radiation. Commander Elena Santos stood at the bridge's observation window, her dark eyes fixed on the distant sprawl of the Meridian Empire's primary trade route. After 3 years of covered observation, she knew the patterns of their ships better than they did themselves. Another patrol passing. Lieutenant Marcus Wong reported from his sensor station, his voice barely above a whisper despite the fact that sound couldn't travel through space. Old habits died hard when you spent your career avoiding detection. The massive Meridian warship that crawled past their position was a testament to Imperial arrogance. All gleaming metal and pulsing energy signatures, not a thought given to stealth or subtlety. The Empire had ruled unopposed for so long they'd forgotten the art of hiding. Elena allowed herself a small smile. That would be their undoing. "Status report," she commanded, turning to face her bridge crew. Each officer sat at their station, surrounded by holographic displays showing data that would have made the Empire's best scientists weep with envy. "Quantum fold drive at standby," Chief Engineer Yuki Hansen responded, her fingers dancing over her controls. "Cloak integrity at 98%. The quantum fold drive was humanity's greatest achievement, a propulsion system that didn't just bend space, but folded it entirely, allowing for instantaneous travel across vast distances. The Empire still struggled with primitive FTL technology. All passive sensors recording," Science Officer Dr. James Chen added. "Their latest shield configurations have been added to the database. Still no indication they've even theorized about quantum mechanics at our level." Elena nodded, satisfaction warming her chest. Earth's strategy had been brilliant in its simplicity. Hide, watch, learn, and advance. While the Meridian Empire spread across the galaxy with brute force, humanity had chosen a different path. They'd detected the Empire's presence 50 years ago, and instead of announcing themselves, they'd watched, studied, evolved. The Empire believed they had cataloged every spacefaring race in the galaxy. Their arrogance was so complete that they'd stopped looking for new civilizations centuries ago. That blindness had given humanity the time they needed to surpass them technologically in almost every way. "New contact," Marcus announced suddenly, his tone sharpening. "Meridian science vessel, heading 03 Mark II. They're running some kind of new scan type." Elena's spine stiffened. "Analysis. It's like nothing we've seen before. They're using quantum resonance." "Wait." Marcus's face paled. "Commander, they're going to." The bridge lights flashed red as proximity alerts screamed to life. The science vessel had stopped dead in space, its sensors pointed directly at them. "They've detected our quantum signature," Yuki reported, fingers flying across her console. "The cloak can't mask it against this type of scan. They know something's here." Elena's mind raced through scenarios, discarding each one until she reached the only viable conclusion. "Battle stations," she ordered, her voice steady despite the gravity of the moment. "Prepare to execute Protocol Omega." Her crew snapped into action, their years of training evident in their smooth efficiency. Protocol Omega had been drilled into every stealth ship crew since the program's inception. If discovered, they would reveal themselves in the most dramatic way possible. "Quantum fold drive spooling," Yuki announced. "Ready in 3, 2, 1. "Execute," Elena commanded. The Shadow Seeker shimmered into visibility mere kilometers from the Meridian science vessel. Its sleek black hull, covered in geometric patterns that defied normal physics, must have looked alien even to the xenoscientists aboard the Empire ship. Elena imagined their confusion, their fear at seeing something so utterly beyond their understanding. "Open a channel," she ordered. "Let's give them something to report back to their superiors." The communications officer nodded, and Elena straightened in her chair. When she spoke, her voice carried all the weight of humanity's decades of preparation. "Meridian vessel, you have detected that which was meant to remain hidden. Remember this moment. Remember what you saw here. The galaxy is larger than you know, and your empire is not as supreme as you believe. We have watched from the shadows, and we are no longer content to merely observe." Before the stunned Meridians could respond, Yuki engaged the quantum fold drive. Space twisted impossibly around them, and the Shadow Seeker vanished, reappearing light years away in an instant. "Message sent to Fleet Command," the communications officer reported. "They acknowledge Protocol Omega is in effect." Elena sank into her chair, the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. Humanity's long vigil in the shadows was over. Now would come the true test of everything they had built, everything they had learned while the Empire slept in its complacent power. "Send a priority message to all stealth ships in the sector," she ordered. "The game has changed. Execute contingency plans and prepare for Phase 2. She turned to look at each member of her crew, seeing in their eyes the same mix of tension and excitement she felt herself. The Empire is about to learn they're not alone in this galaxy. More importantly, they're about to learn they're not supreme. As the Shadow Seeker glided through quantum space toward its rally point, Elena thought about the shockwaves this encounter would send through the Empire. Their carefully maintained illusion of total dominion was about to shatter, and humanity would be the hammer that broke it. The time for hiding was over. The time for action had begun. Admiral Kyriax of the Meridian Empire stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, his 4 arms clasped behind his back as he studied the holographic display of the human settlement below. The colony world of Haven spread out beneath them, its cities gleaming under twin suns. To his eyes, it looked primitive, vulnerable. Pathetic, he chittered to his executive officer. "These humans think they can challenge us with such meager defenses. I see no planetary shields, no orbital platforms, not even a proper space elevator." His facial tendrils twitched with amusement. The Science Council must have been hallucinating when they reported advanced technology. The executive officer, Commander Vextil, seemed less certain. The stealth vessel they encountered was likely a fluke, Kyrax interrupted. "Some salvage technology they barely understand. No matter. They will kneel before the Empire, as all others have." On the surface of Haven, Governor Maya Chen watched the Meridian warships descend through her office's smart glass windows. The glass displayed tactical overlays, tracking each enemy vessel with precision. She touched her neural interface, connecting to Haven's defense grid. "Status report," she subvocalized. "All civilians have been evacuated to the quantum shelters." Her AI assistant responded directly into her mind. "Defense systems are primed but remain in stealth configuration. The enemy remains unaware." Maya smiled grimly. The Empire's arrogance was everything intelligence had predicted. They hadn't even conducted detailed scans of the surface, so convinced were they of their superiority. They couldn't see the quantum-shifted defensive installations that honeycomb the entire colony, or the fleet of advanced fighters waiting in parallel space. The Eternal Dominion moved into low orbit, its massive form blocking out one of the suns. A transmission burst from the ship, broadcasting on all frequencies. "Attention human settlement." Kyrax's voice boomed. "Your pathetic attempt at deception has failed. The Meridian Empire has ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years. Your choice is simple: surrender and serve, or resist and perish. You have one planetary rotation to decide." Maya opened a channel to Colonel Sarah John, Haven's defense commander. "They've made their declaration. Are we ready?" "More than ready," Sarah replied, anticipation clear in her voice. "The quantum grid is charged. Strike fighters are in position in parallel space. We're just waiting for your word." Maya took a deep breath. This moment would change the galaxy forever. "Execute Operation Thunderbolt." The response was immediate and devastating. The seemingly defenseless colony transformed into a deadly trap. Quantum shields snapped into existence around every major population center. Hidden defense towers emerged from parallel space, their weapons already tracking targets. And from quantum folds all around the Meridian fleet, swarms of human fighters appeared. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, Alarms screamed as sensors suddenly detected hundreds of new contacts. Impossible. Kyrax roared. Where did they? His words were cut off as the first wave of quantum torpedoes struck his fleet. The advanced weapons didn't just impact the ship's shields. They phased through them entirely, their warheads detonating directly against the hulls. 3 Meridian cruisers disappeared in expanding clouds of plasma and debris. Return fire, Kyrax commanded, his earlier confidence shattered. Launch all fighters. Show these primitives the might of the Empire. But the Meridian fighters were hopelessly outclassed. The human vessels seemed to ignore the laws of physics, appearing and disappearing at will as they pressed their attack. Their quantum drives allowed them to outmaneuver the Imperial ships with ease, their advanced weapons bypassing shields as if they didn't exist. In her command center deep beneath Haven's surface, Colonel Zhang orchestrated the battle with cold precision. Strike Group Alpha, quantum shift to Sector 4. Beta Group, execute attack pattern Omega 3. Keep them off balance. Don't let them coordinate their defense. The battle was over in less than 20 minutes. Of the 15 ships in the Meridian battle group, only the Eternal Dominion remained, its hull scared and burning. The mighty flagship hung in space, its weapons disabled, its engines dead. Maya opened a channel to the crippled vessel. Admiral Kyrax, she said, her voice calm but carrying an edge of steel. Your choice is now simple. Surrender and live to warn your empire about us, or persist in your arrogance and perish. You have 1 minute to decide. On his ruined bridge, surrounded by dead and wounded crew members, Kyrax stared at the tactical display in disbelief. His mighty fleet, destroyed by a colony he had dismissed as primitive. His sensors now showed the true extent of Haven's defenses, the sophisticated technology that had been invisible to their scans. How? He whispered. How did we not see? Because you weren't looking, Maya replied, having heard his whispered question. Your empire's greatest weakness is its conviction that it has nothing left to learn. We are about to teach you otherwise. The Eternal Dominion surrendered moments later. As Maya watched Meridian escape pods descending toward designated landing zones, she opened a channel to Earth Command. Haven Base to Command. The first strike has been repelled. Minimal damage to colonial infrastructure. Multiple enemy vessels captured mostly intact, ready to begin Phase 3. The response was immediate. Well done, Haven. The Empire has thrown their first punch and found nothing but air. Now it's our turn to strike back. Prepare for Phase 3 initiation. Maya looked out over her colony, still appearing peaceful and vulnerable to casual observation. The Empire had just learned a costly lesson about underestimating humanity. But this was only the beginning. The real war was about to start, and humanity was ready. They had hidden in the shadows, watching and learning, for 50 years. Now it was time to show the galaxy exactly what humanity had become. The Grand Council chamber of the Meridian Empire fell silent as Admiral Kyrax finished his report. The massive circular room, with its towering crystalline walls and floating platforms for each council member, had never felt so suffocating. Hundreds of representatives from the Empire's dominant species sat in stunned silence, trying to process what they had just heard. Supreme Chancellor Vexthor, his scaled skin pale with rage, leaned forward on his elevated platform. You expect us to believe, he hissed, that a single human colony destroyed 13 ships of the Imperial fleet. Not destroyed, Kyrax corrected, his voice hollow. 12 were captured. Their weapons, their technology, they operate on principles we don't understand. They can fold space itself, move through dimensions we can't even detect. From her platform, Science Minister Zilavir activated a holographic display, showing sensor readings from the battle. These readings are impossible, she declared, her luminescent appendages pulsing with agitation. They violate fundamental laws of physics. No, came a quiet voice from the shadows. All heads turned as Ancient One Telkar stepped into the light. The wizened advisor, one of the few surviving members of the Empire's founding species, rarely spoke at council meetings. When he did, all listened. "They don't violate the laws of physics," Telkar continued, his ancient eyes fixed on the holographic battle data. "They operate on laws we never discovered. While we grew complacent in our power, these humans were watching us, learning, evolving. They took paths in science and technology that we dismissed as impossible." Meanwhile, light years away, the human war preparation entered its final phase. In the massive shipyards orbiting Mars, Fleet Admiral David Chen watched as the last vessels of the Strike Fleet received their quantum fold drives. The ships were unlike anything the Empire had ever seen. Sleek, dark vessels that could slip between dimensions as easily as conventional ships moved through space. "Final status report," he commanded, his neural interface connecting him directly to the fleet's eye network. "Strike Fleet at 98% combat readiness," the AI responded. "Quantum grid synchronization complete. All ships show green on parallel space drives and phase weapons." David turned to his strategic advisor, Dr. Sarah Mitchell, who had spent decades studying the Empire's military doctrine. Their response so far. Sarah projected a holographic map of Imperial fleet movements. Exactly as predicted. They're consolidating their forces around core worlds, leaving their frontier vulnerable. Their doctrine hasn't changed in centuries. They simply can't adapt quickly enough. Back in the Imperial capital, the Grand Council's debate had devolved into chaos. "We must strike now," General Kravnar demanded, his warrior caste markings glowing with anger. "Crush these humans before they can spread further." "With what?" Science Minister Zillaver countered. "Our best fleet was just defeated by a single colony. We don't even know where their homeworld is." Ancient One Telkar watched the argument with growing concern. In all his centuries, he had never seen the Council so divided, so afraid. "We face an enemy unlike any we have encountered," he announced, his quiet voice somehow cutting through the chaos. "They do not think as we do. They do not fight as we do. And most importantly, they do not fear us." In Earth's central command complex, buried deep beneath the Himalayas, the human leadership made their final preparations. President Alina Torres stood before the assembled military command, her expression grave but determined. "For 50 years, we prepared for this moment," she declared. "We watched the Empire, learned their weaknesses, developed technologies they never imagined possible. They believed themselves supreme rulers of the galaxy. It's time to show them how wrong they are." She nodded to Fleet Admiral Chen, who activated a massive holographic display showing the position of every human fleet and colony. "Operation Quantum Storm begins in 12 hours, he announced. "All fleet elements are in position. Our quantum communication network remains undetected. The Empire still has no idea of our true numbers or capabilities." Dr. Mitchell stepped forward, highlighting key Imperial worlds on the map. Their response to Haven's defense has been predictable. They've pulled their fleets back to protect their core worlds, leaving their outer territories exposed. They expect us to attack along conventional routes. Through normal space, they cannot conceive of our true capabilities. In the Imperial capital, the Council finally reached a decision. "Deploy the Grand Fleet," Supreme Chancellor Vexthor commanded. "All available ships. Find these humans. Destroy them. Show them the true might of the Meridian Empire." Ancient One Telkar closed his eyes in resignation. "You still don't understand," he whispered, but no one was listening. "They have already won. They won the moment we became too proud to look for them, too arrogant to imagine they could surpass us." As the Imperial Grand Fleet assembled, humanity's Strike Fleet made its final preparations. Admiral Chen stood on his flagship's bridge, watching as quantum fold drives spooled up across his command. "Send the signal to all ships," he ordered. "Operation Quantum Storm is go. Remember your training. Remember what we fight for. The Empire thought they could ignore us. Then they thought they could subjugate us. Now they'll learn what humanity is truly capable of. Across human space, quantum fold drives activated simultaneously. Hundreds of ships slipped between dimensions, preparing to strike at targets across the Empire. The real war was about to begin, and the galaxy would never be the same. In the Imperial capital, as the Grand Fleet departed with great ceremony and confidence, Ancient One Telkar looked up at the stars and whispered, "The storm is coming, and we are not ready." The Imperial Grand Fleet moved through space in perfect formation, 10,000 ships strong, their hulls gleaming under distant stars. It was the largest assemblage of military might in the Empire's history. At its center, the super-dreadnought Imperial Dawn carried the combined admiralty of the Meridian forces. Fleet Master Ktarkan stood on its command deck, watching tactical displays with grim satisfaction. "Let these humans see what true power looks like," he declared to his assembled commanders. "Their parlor tricks at Haven will mean nothing against the full might-off." Multiple contacts. The sensor officer's panicked cry cut through the command deck, quantum signatures appearing everywhere. Space itself seemed to tear open as human vessels emerged from parallel dimensions, but they weren't appearing in front of the Grand Fleet as expected. They were behind it, above it, below it, within it. Fleet Admiral Sarah Chen watched from her flagship Humanity's Dawn as Operation Quantum Storm unfolded exactly as planned. "All strike groups, execute attack pattern Omega," she commanded. "Show them what we've learned in 50 years of watching." The human fleet's response was devastating in its precision. Ships equipped with quantum fold drives didn't just outmaneuver the Imperial vessels, they ignored conventional space entirely. A human cruiser would appear inside an Imperial formation, fire its phase cannons through impenetrable shields, and vanish before return fire could be targeted. On the Imperial Dawn, chaos reigned. Impossible. Sarkhan roared as another battle group disappeared from his tactical display. "How are they predicting our formations? Our responses?" In her command chair, Admiral Chen allowed herself a small smile. 50 years, she subvocalized to her neural interface. 50 years of watching every Imperial fleet exercise, every training maneuver, every tactical doctrine. We know how they think better than they do. But the attack on the Grand Fleet was only part of the deception. Across Imperial space, quantum fold drives activated in perfect synchronization. Human strike teams appeared simultaneously at hundreds of critical installations, shipyards, command centers, defense platforms. They had been practicing these precise strikes for years, perfecting their timing down to the microsecond. In the Imperial capital, Ancient One Telkar burst into the Grand Council chamber, his usually calm demeanor shattered. "They're everywhere," he announced to the stunned council members. "The humans, they're striking throughout the Empire. Not just military targets. They're seizing our quantum communications relays, our sensor networks, The chamber's holographic displays suddenly flickered and died. Across the Empire, quantum communication networks went dark. Sensor grids failed. The vast infrastructure that had kept the Empire connected for millennia simply stopped. On her flagship, Admiral Chen opened a channel to all human forces. Phase 2 complete. Begin Phase 3. The true mastery of humanity's strategy became apparent as the Empire tried to respond. With their quantum communications severed, Imperial forces had to rely on light-speed communications. Their carefully coordinated defense plans fell apart as each sector was forced to act independently, unable to know what was happening elsewhere. "You see," Chen transmitted to the Imperial Dawn, "we didn't just study your technology. We studied your psychology, your absolute certainty in your own supremacy, your inability to conceive of defeat. It made you predictable." In the Grand Council chamber, as emergency power systems cast red shadows across panicked faces, Supreme Chancellor Vexthor finally understood. "They weren't hiding because they were weak," he whispered. "They were hiding because they were smart." The human fleet's attacks were devastating in their efficiency. They hadn't targeted the Empire's greatest strengths. They had eliminated its ability to coordinate, to respond, to adapt. Every quantum fold, every precision strike, was the result of decades of observation and planning. Your empire is vast, Chen continued, her voice reaching every Imperial commander through captured communication networks. That is your greatest weakness. Without your quantum networks, your forces cannot coordinate. Each sector must fight alone. And we can be everywhere at once. In the debris field that had been the pride of the Imperial Grand Fleet, Fleet Master Exarchon watched helplessly as human ships systematically disabled or captured his remaining vessels. They moved with impossible precision, clearly communicating and coordinating despite the loss of quantum networks. How? He demanded. How are you still coordinating your attacks? Admiral Chen's response was calm, almost pitying. Because we never relied on quantum communications, we developed our own technologies, our own methods. Everything you're seeing, the fold drives, the phase weapons, the parallel space sensors, we developed them while watching you, learning from your mistakes, your limitations. Across Imperial space, the pattern repeated. Isolated, unable to communicate or coordinate, Imperial forces found themselves facing an enemy that could appear anywhere, strike without warning, and disappear before they could respond. An enemy that knew their tactics, their responses, their weaknesses. In the capital, Ancient One Telkar watched the reports of defeat flood in through increasingly primitive communication channels. We forgot the most important lesson, he told the silent council chamber. We forgot to keep looking up at the stars with wonder. We forgot that we might not be alone in our wisdom. And now we pay the price for our arrogance. The great deception was complete. Humanity hadn't just prepared for this war. They had shaped its every aspect, manipulating Imperial responses with a precision born of decades of study. And as Phase 3 of Operation Quantum Storm continued to unfold, the Empire began to realize that they weren't just losing a war. They were witnessing the end of an era. In the Imperial Palace's Grand Throne Room, Supreme Chancellor Vexthor stood before the assembled remains of the Council, his proud bearing finally broken. Through the vast crystalline windows behind him, the capital world's 3 suns were setting, casting long shadows that seemed to herald the end of an era. The humans are approaching, he announced, his voice hollow. Their fleet will reach our orbit in moments. Ancient One Telkar stepped forward, his ancient eyes filled with an emotion few had seen before. Hope. Perhaps, he said softly, this is not the end we fear, but the beginning we need. Space above the capital rippled as the human fleet emerged from quantum space. Leading them was the humanity's dawn, its sleek black hull absorbing starlight. On its bridge, Admiral Sarah Chen stood with President Elena Torres, who had come personally to oversee this final phase. All ships in position, Chen reported. The Empire's remaining forces have stood down. Elena nodded, her expression thoughtful. Open a channel to the palace. It's time to show them why we really came. In the throne room, the air shimmered as a holographic projection appeared. President Torres's image stood before the council, her presence commanding despite the intangible nature of her form. People of the Meridian Empire, she began, you believe you know why we hid from you for 50 years. You think we were afraid, gathering strength for revenge or conquest. You're wrong. She gestured, and the hologram expanded to show images from Earth's history. We studied you not out of fear, but out of wisdom. We saw in your empire a reflection of humanity's own past, the danger of power without perspective, of knowledge without wisdom. The images shifted to show the development of human technology, their peaceful colonies, their advances in science and understanding. We could have revealed ourselves decades ago, but we chose to wait, to learn, to understand, and yes, to surpass you technologically, not to destroy you, but to help you. Ancient One Telkar stepped forward, his eyes wide. You mean, your empire has ruled through force for 10,000 years, Elena continued. You've stagnated, forgotten how to grow, how to question, how to wonder. We hid and watched and learned, so that when we finally revealed ourselves, we could offer you something more valuable than conquest, a future. In orbit, human ships were already beginning their work. Quantum field generators activated, restoring communications across Imperial space. But these weren't the old Imperial networks. They were new, more advanced systems, gifts from humanity to their former watchers. "We don't want to rule you," Elena declared. "We want to teach you, to learn from you in return, to show you the paths of science and understanding that you never explored because you thought you knew everything there was to know." She turned to Supreme Chancellor Vexthor. "Your empire doesn't need to end. It needs to transform, to remember what it feels like to look up at the stars with wonder instead of ownership." Across Imperial space, human ships were sharing their technology with their former enemies. Quantum fold drives were being installed in Imperial vessels. Phase weapon designs were being transmitted to their engineers. But more importantly, the underlying principles, the new ways of thinking about space, time, and reality, were being shared. "This is what we spent 50 years preparing for," Elena explained, her hologram walking among the stunned council members. "Not a war of conquest, but a revolution of understanding. We could have destroyed your empire. Instead, we chose to awaken it." Ancient One Telkar laughed, a sound of pure joy that echoed through the throne room. "All this time," he said, "we thought we were the teachers of the galaxy. But we needed to become students again." Over the next hours, days, and weeks, the true scope of humanity's plan became clear. They had developed their advanced technology not just for military advantage, but as a proof of concept. Evidence that there were still mysteries in the universe, still paths unexplored, still wonders to discover. Imperial scientists worked alongside human researchers, their minds open to new possibilities. Imperial ships, equipped with quantum fold drives, began exploring parts of the galaxy they had never been able to reach before. And most importantly, the Empire's culture began to change, remembering the thrill of discovery, the joy of learning something new. 1 month after the invasion, President Torres stood with Supreme Chancellor Vexthor in the newly established Galactic Science Academy on Earth. Through its quantum glass windows, they could see students from 100 species working together, sharing ideas, challenging assumptions. "We had forgotten what it meant to be curious," Vexthor admitted, watching a young Imperial scientist excitedly explain a new theory to her human colleagues. "We had forgotten what it meant to not know everything." Elena smiled. "That's the greatest gift any species can receive, the reminder that the universe is larger than our understanding of it. That there's always more to learn, more to discover, more to become." In orbit above Earth, Ancient One Telkar stood on the observation deck of a human research station, watching ships from across the galaxy arrive through quantum space. Each carried scientists, explorers, and dreamers, all drawn by humanity's promise of new horizons. "They did not come to conquer us," he wrote in his final memoir. "They came to awaken us. In 50 years of watching, they learned our greatest weakness, not our technology, not our military doctrine, but our certainty that we had nothing left to learn. And in showing us how wrong we were, they gave us back the greatest gift of all, the ability to wonder. The age of the Meridian Empire was over. The age of discovery had begun."